It was nice. And then my grandma ate stuff. Got them Monday we all went to see that walk. Was it cute? It was a nice. And I got something about where do you worship? I said, well, since you asked, yeah, so I told him
That still goes well with a pair of blue jeans, you know.
The shirts I think go well with
Those are the best ones. Okay, I'm a little bit surprised this evening. The PowerPoints look very, very nice and colorful, and they don't look anything like that on my computer. It's all browns and things like that. So I like this version better. So we're going to continue our class on making decisions this evening. Today's topic is Ask the Saints, and to be clear on this, I'm not talking about the New Orleans Saints or any other social group that uses the word saints in their name, or beatified saints or anything like that. I'm using this in the New Testament sense, Christians, us. This is us asking each other for advice or help on making a decision. I guess I have to turn this on. Still haven't figured that out yet. So when making a decision, asking others for advice can be helpful. And in this lesson, we will look at reasons for asking for advice, who to ask, and how to respond if someone asks you for counsel when making a decision. And on my slides, that's bigger text, so I can fix that when I get this PowerPoint in that color. So now, I want to point out before we get too far in the lesson that this lesson will include some opinions, basically my opinions. I'm optimistic that these will be well-reasoned opinions, but they are opinions, and yours may be a little bit different from mine, and I would encourage you to share yours in this. So we're going to try to get to a really practical type of a study here on why to do this, how to do this, and some thought that should go into doing, asking somebody for help with making a decision. So the review, we make decisions every day. We've discussed this from the very beginning, and most of our daily decisions are not exciting or interesting. I use the word mundane when we introduce this topic, really not exciting type of a thing. All of our decisions will reflect our core values and beliefs, including in a situation where the decision I make doesn't line up with the core values and beliefs I verbalize. In that situation, look at the decision. That will tell you the character of the individual there. We should know the will of God when making decisions and choose accordingly. Why? Because we're His children. And we're supposed to be impacted by our Father and living to His glory. And so He ought to have a little bit of influence in the decisions that we're making. Making decisions in harmony with God's will brings both earthly and spiritual blessings. You'll have a better life if you make decisions according to God's will. You will have a better eternity if you make decisions according to God's will. Lots of decisions are mundane, but important decisions will often benefit from a more deliberate approach. And a Bible can offer guidance in making decisions. It may not address our specific decision, but it teaches godly principles that can and should be used to guide the process. So, for example, we need to have a job, to be employed, to get an income, to take care of ourselves, right? Everybody understands that. Go read 1 Thessalonians, if you have any questions about that. Paul's very clear about that. The fact that I need to have a job to take care of myself doesn't necessarily mean that I ought to be the the car driver for a group of bank robbers who are hitting banks in Indiana or something like that. That's excluded on the virtue of the fact I'm not supposed to steal. I'm not supposed to participate in that. So the Bible principles will either tend to endorse a decision that we might be thinking about or tend to prohibit it. But it is still good and healthy guidance, and we should be taking advantage of that part of the process. We can ask God directly for guidance through prayer. That's one of the things that we should be asking about in prayer is, what should I do in this particular situation, or, what path should I follow? Just pray and let God show us the path. So, seeking counsel. We don't have a mini inductive study this week. We're just going to look at a few Proverbs. Proverbs 1 verse 5 from the ESV reads, wow, that's hard to read, isn't it? Not here it isn't. Let the wise hear and increase in learning, and the one who understands obtain guidance. Proverbs 9:9, give instruction to a man, and he will be still wiser. Teach a righteous man, and he will increase his learning. And the way of the fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man is he who listens to counsel. He who walks with wise men shall be wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. What's Solomon teaching us there?
Who your friends are.
Say again? Who your friends are? There's an influencing factor there, isn't there? But is really, I think, teaching us, number one, we don't know everything. So if you don't know everything and you start asking people, what kind of people should you ask? A wise person, right? Somebody who actually knows what they're talking about. That's the type of person you ought to ask. And if you are wise, what will you do with the information? You learn from it. You'll grow from it. And then there's another class of people here that he's talking about, fools. This is the person that you don't want to listen to. They tend to already have all the answers, and it's probably, it's most likely wrong. And they're going to get you into trouble if you follow their advice. So those, two major lessons we can gain are, we don't know everything, so listen to counsel. Counsel is good, according to the Proverbs writer. This differentiates the Proverbs writer from our culture right now. We want to be the person who stands on our own 2 feet and knows our own facts and can capable of figuring out everything and anything all by ourselves. And Solomon would look at that and say, you're nuts. He was the wisest person that ever lived, and he would say, you're nuts. The second principle is pick the right kind of person to listen to. You are going to be you and I are going to be influenced by somebody whether we choose to or not. The company that we keep is going to have an influence on us whether we like it or not. So pick good company and learn from them. That's his whole gist in the 4 passages that we read. If you don't and you pick the wrong type of company, you have to expect trouble. It's a given. It's going to happen. Questions or comments? You're talking about Rehoboam? That's not fair. You cheated. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Yeah, you're talking about Rehoboam. You cheated. So, all right, reasons we should seek advice. Number 1, we are finite beings. There are limits to what we know and what we understand. So when you're thinking about wrapping your mind around a decision that could go multiple different ways, there may be factors involved in this thing that you don't understand. Well, even though we're all finite beings, we're also very different. Your knowledge, your experience is very different from mine. Mine is different from yours. But oftentimes, your knowledge and your experience may cover a gap that I don't have, a gap in my own knowledge. You understand a little bit about this, or maybe I can return the favor to you. Now, part of the reason, when we talked earlier about looking at the Bible for some guidance in making decisions, or using prayer to discuss our decisions with God. Part of the reason for doing that in that case is because God is not a finite being in that regard. He knows everything and the outcomes of these kinds of things. And so getting his input on the decision is very valuable. He knows the outcomes that can happen out of this sort of a thing. We don't, and sometimes we still need to talk to each other about this. Second point, our judgment may be impaired in this decision. Our judgment can be impaired because we simply don't know everything. You know, there are certain things that you can do unintentionally that can harm yourself or harm other people, and we're not really aware of it sometimes until we actually make that mistake and cause the harm to somebody. There could be a health issue. If you've ever gone in and had surgery or a major health issue at a hospital or something like that, they're always asking, like when I've had the surgery, my gallbladder out, you know, is this your wife? Yeah. Can she make decisions about your health while you're out? And I said, yes. She got a little bit too giddy for that, you know. A lot of possibilities there in conceding that kind of authority. But I knew I was going to be impaired, and so I trusted her to do it. Overwhelming circumstances. Have you ever been in a situation where it just seems like today life is piling it on and there's no end in sight? It's almost paralyzing, and we don't have the capacity to think rationally about some of these things. A sin problem. That can be overwhelming. That's the sort of thing that we don't want to have to admit that, number one. And yet some of them are the types of things that are like addictive behaviors and things like that where you can't handle it by yourself. So, you know, our judgment's impaired in those types of circumstances. The outcome may require additional support. It may take time and effort to reach the conclusion of the matter. Just because you made a decision doesn't mean the problem is solved, does it? It means you have chosen a path to solve the problem. So, for example, a long-term health care issue, you make a decision to do the treatment because that gives you the best possibility of the outcome. But, oh, by the way, you know, this treatment's going to take, 4 to 5 months, and it may involve physical therapy, it may involve, chemotherapy, it may involve a lot of different types of things and stuff like that. And that's going to require support. It's hard for us to handle that by ourselves. So there's, again, seek some advice about this, how to manage the situation while it's really all over you. In Ecclesiastes 4, 9 through 12, we read, "Two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. For if either of them falls, the one who falls, the one will lift up his companion. But woe to the one who falls when there is not another to lift him up. Furthermore, if two lie down together, they keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? And if one can overpower him who is alone, two can resist him. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly torn apart." General life principle? Yeah. Find good friends. Have somebody on your side in all of this kind of a thing. Because you can't do it all alone. Well, decisions is just a special case. Maybe I can't do this one by myself, and I should ask somebody to help. Say again? Yes, especially the one staying warm. Yeah. That's why all married couples have 2 different body temperatures. Yes.
I got to thinking about the sister. She was doing jury duty.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very important case, life and death, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
She came to the church to ask for some support from helping her make a critical decision like that.
Yeah, that's actually a really good example. Somebody on a jury with a very important verdict to be rendered there came to the church and asked for the church to pray that she would make the right decision in the verdict. That's actually a pretty good use of asking somebody for counsel. They don't even have to know the specifics, but they know the God who knows the specifics, so that's a good thing. Iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. That's Proverbs 27:17. This is kind of like a friendship verse, but when you have a good working relationship, you make each other better. And in the decision-making process, that is really helpful in being able to discuss that with somebody who sharpens you and that you sharpen them. So Good thing to keep in mind for that. Dimensions of making decisions. Not all decisions are like this. Most decisions are pretty straightforward. I don't think, like I mentioned earlier on, you don't need to spend 15 minutes in prayer asking God what you should have for breakfast tomorrow morning. Do it in 15 seconds. It's not a crucial decision unless you got a food allergy or something like that. You can if you want to, but you don't necessarily need to do that. Most of our decisions are, I think, tend to come in that category, but others do not. So how difficult or complicated or risky is the outcome of this decision? You make this decision, what happens if you get it wrong? If it's, on some decisions, if you get it wrong, somebody winds up in the hospital. Somebody winds up in a broken relationship. Somebody winds up getting hurt in some capacity from it. There's risk there. That might be a very appropriate decision to spend some time praying about and talking with somebody about, because you don't want to do that to yourself or to somebody else. How complicated is the implementation of the decision? If the decision that you're about to make requires that you carefully coordinate 23 separate steps and time them out, it ain't going to happen. If it's that complicated, you need to find another solution. The military has a principle called the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. The more complicated the plan, the more likely it is to fail. So, get to the point with it. How difficult is it? Are you willing to pay this particular price for that particular decision? Example, suppose that we wanted to buy ourselves a Rolls Royce. Rolls Royce is a really expensive car. Like, it probably costs more than my house, type of expensive car. I could possibly do it if I sold everything I had and took 3 jobs and maybe hit like 4 or 5 banks to get a down payment or something like that. And then maybe I could pay cash for Rolls Royce. What have I accomplished? Got a Rolls, probably prison time when they catch up to you and all of these other types of things, so the consequences of it, how difficult is it and is it really worth it? Sometimes you have to say it is going to be difficult, but it is worth it. So major health treatment, probably going to be difficult, probably going to be worth it, but still, discuss it. How knowledgeable or competent in this area is the person I am considering for counsel? Within this congregation are people that I have asked for specific kinds of counsel. I've asked Rodney Mayo about electrical questions because he's an electrician. He's already forgotten more than I know. And technically, I have an electrical engineering degree, but I can assure you that's not the same thing. I've asked John Hall plumbing questions because he's a plumber. He knows about these things. I've asked Ken Sargent heating and cooling questions because he knows about these things. And these are all very practical matters where I went and found somebody that knew something more about than I did, and I asked him a question. Other situations, I ask Richard questions all the time about some stuff. He asks me questions all the time about some stuff because I trust his judgment, and he's crazy, so he asks me. And also, am I confident that this person has my best interests in mind? How many have ever walked on a car lot because you needed a car and you told the salesperson, I'm looking for something in this price range or something like this or something like that, and they immediately grab you and take you over to this other thing that's nowhere, it's not even on the same planet as what you're looking for, and they try to sell you that. When we moved out and built our house, we decided we wanted to get a pickup truck, went down to a used car lot and told the guy I was willing to pay this much money for it. And he showed me a pickup truck that was twice that. And we drove it around and looked at it and stuff like that. And I thought him doing this was, they're going to give me a price cut on it. No, when we got back to the office, test drive over, he says, yes, it's going to cost this much money. I said, I told you I was willing to spend this much, and you did this. Whose interest was he looking out for? Absolutely his. So, is the person that you're asking for advice on this decision going to look at their interest or your interest? That's, You need to understand that, because the answer that you're going to hear from that person is going to reflect that question. Any questions or comments? Examples of asking for counsel. This is where Cheating Betty got in here and asked the question about Rehoboam, son of Solomon, 1 Kings chapter 12, verses 1 through 11. I don't intend to read it to you. I just wanted you to have the scripture. Do you remember the circumstance? Solomon died, and his son Rehoboam was appointed king. And now the hand of God is in this. Let me remind you going into this, because Solomon had done some things God told him not to do. And God told Solomon, I'm going to take the kingdom and 10 tribes out of this kingdom and give them to your rival. Give them to somebody else, Rehoboam, his son. So the people come to Rehoboam, and the people say, we have worked really hard during the 40-year reign of your father Solomon. And that is true. Solomon's reign was the golden age of Israel. Israel had achieved its greatest power, its greatest wealth, its greatest fame in the reign of Solomon. But it was a lot of work for a lot of people, and not everybody profited from this work the way that the nobles or other people did. And so they come to Rehoboam and say, make our load lighter. And Rehoboam's first statement was the right idea. He said, let me talk to some people and I'll get back to you. And so he goes to talk to the older counselors, and the older counselors say, yeah, that Solomon's yoke was hard. If you want to be a servant to the people, and if you want them to bond with you the way that you want, go ahead and reduce the workload. And then he goes and talks to some younger counselors, his peers, and they say, no. Tell them, my father disciplined you with rods. I'm going to discipline you with scorpions. Tell them, my little finger is thicker than my father's thigh. Smallest visible muscle on my body is bigger than the largest visible muscle on my father's body. And so he does that. He follows their advice. What did it cost him? The kingdom. 10 tribes rebelled and say, yeah, we have no part of this anymore. And so now we have Israel and Judah. And that had consequences as well. Second example, Moses during the Exodus. In Exodus chapter 18, verses 13 through 23, Moses' father-in-law comes to visit, and they're around the camp somewhere and wherever they were at. And Moses sets up a whole day, and he's out here, and the people are lined up coming to get judgments or decisions on dispute decisions and things like that from Moses. He's the only one that's doing this. And so these people are all lined up all day. And if you can imagine standing in line at the DMV trying to get your license done on a packed day, this is like that, only worse.
It's hot.
Yeah. It's hot. You got the stupid sticker, and the line is moving like a dying snail. And, imagine doing that with millions of people out in the desert. And his father-in-law looks to Moses and he says, this isn't good. This is not a good way to do this. What you need to do is you need to find some people and let them make the smaller decisions, and then put other people that can make, harder decisions, and other people make harder decisions. And then when it's really tough, let them come to you. He says, if you will do this, the people will be heard, they will be happier, and you won't be stressed out or burned out or, any of these other types of things that can happen to somebody in that situation. And he followed his father-in-law's advice, and guess what? Things improved, both for the Israelites, they were less frustrated, and for Moses. He wasn't worn out having to deal with this every day after day after day. So that's, one guy listened to some good advice and some bad advice and chose the bad advice, and the other guy, Moses, listened to some good advice and he said, that's a good idea, I'm going to follow it. Things worked out. That's why you ask people for advice, is to get that kind of an input. Doesn't mean you're not making the decision, but it does mean that you're trying to pay attention to what's around you and be aware of things that you might not know, or consider alternative viewpoints, something that you're going to get out of asking for that and then listening to it. So, if you are going to ask for advice from somebody, here are some points. This is the really opinionated part now. Here are some things that we can consider. I gotta find this. that we should take into consideration if we're going to ask somebody for advice. Number one, choose someone who is a Christian. Why?
Want them to have a biblical outlook.
Same outlook, right? You know, if you're looking at a decision that you're making, you've probably considered a biblical point of view. You may have even prayed about this thing, but you want somebody who has the same mindset and the same values to weigh in on that. This is critical. People who do not share this will tell you to do some things that you look at it and say, what in the world? Why in the world would I do something like that? Because I know that's not going to work. I know that's sin or that's going to violate God's law. So you want somebody who has that. Choose someone who has experience with the situation. Mention Rodney Mayo. You know why I asked him about my electrical wiring questions and things like that? He knew. I didn't. He knew. Kind of a funny thing, I did a lot of wiring down in my basement here, but I'm one of these people that I know what I know and I know what I don't want to know. I will run that cable all the way up to the electrical box right there, and then I will pay somebody to come in and connect it to the breakers. Yeah, Rodney has done it for me, you know, because I don't want to have to turn power off to the whole house to be able to do this thing. And I happen to know that 110 volts or 220 volts at the wrong time in the wrong place will kill you. So I'm not comfortable doing it, so I use somebody else to do that for me. I know what I know, and I know what I don't know. So think about that sometimes too. So choose somebody who has experience with the situation. Choose someone who is honest. One funny thing, you know, if you've ever sat down with an investment counselor or something like that, you're about to entrust somebody with a sum of your money. They're going to invest this for you. You got a keen interest in how that's going to work out? Absolutely you do. So, you know, you don't want somebody who's going to embezzle from you or do anything like that. And I have known people who have been victimized by that type of a scam. So, you know, you want to make sure that the person is honest, you know, in what they do, that there's a fiduciary trust. And most of these people who do, you know, financial planning and financial counseling are pretty trustworthy people. But, you know, you still have to be a little bit cautious about it. Choose someone who loves you, and I have agape in parenthesis there. Agape is the love that seeks the highest good of another. So if you're asking me for advice, then you want to make sure that I have your highest good in mind. If you know, if somebody you know doesn't like you, you ask them for advice, what can happen out of that? I don't like Art. I'm going to tell him how to get himself hurt. You know, you'd have to be considering that kind of a thing and you know, and asking advice of somebody. So don't do that. You know, trust somebody who agapes you, has agape for you. As a bonus, choose someone who loves phileo you. Phileo is the warm, affectionate friendship love. This is that, you know, when we feel that closeness of people that we actually enjoy being around, which we can with agape too, but this is your friendship type love, spousal type love in some sense, because you know they have an affection for you and they're going to do the best that they can because they have this affection for you, just as you should be willing to do for them because that's your friend. So that's advice on choosing an advisor. Now, what about the flip side of the coin? What if somebody comes and asks you to provide counsel to them? First question, am I qualified to assist this person in this decision? Didn't ask Rodney about plumbing or HVAC. Now, he was an electrician and they work around this stuff, and he probably knows more about both of those things than I do. But it wasn't really his expertise like being an electrician was. I had other people that I asked for that because they're a little bit better qualified, I think. Do the same with, you know, areas of knowledge, you know, that I might have. Hint, I don't know a whole lot about anything, so I'll save you a trip. But make sure that, you know, that you're qualified to assist the person with the thing that they're asking your advice on before doing it. Is someone else better qualified to assist with this decision? I've already told you, have an electrical problem, call Rodney. You know, he knows the answer to this. And Rodney's shaking his head, no, don't look at him, just, you know. Yeah, he's a nice guy, trust me. But, you know, if you're not the one that they should be talking to, do you know the person that maybe they should be talking to? Maybe it's more appropriate in this circumstance to guide them in a different direction there. What level of confidentiality is needed on this decision? If this is a sin problem, you know, James chapter 5 tells us, you know, confess your sins to one another, pray for one another, this kind of a thing. If somebody comes and asks, you know, they're confessing to you, want you to pray with them about this sort of thing, do you want to blab this all over social media? Absolutely not. Not even if they say go ahead and blab it all over social media. That, you know, you don't do that in that situation. My specific feeling or opinion on this is err on the side of confidentiality. Even for the trivial things, you know, don't say, you know, even if you have to say, you know what, I don't know a lot about that particular problem, but I know somebody who does. I can ask them, you know, if they would be willing to sit down with you. When you go talk to that person, don't even mention the name of the person that, you know, that you're asking on behalf of. Just because you can get to that as soon as you find out that this person is qualified. So just be, you know, maintain confidentiality. It's a whole lot easier to keep it in the bag than to let it out of the bag and then try to run around and put it all back in there. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. You know, just not going to happen. Second point, or fourth point, is the scope of this decision beyond my ability or my legal, moral, or ethical judgment? This doesn't happen very often, but there are problems that a person can encounter and come and ask you about that, you know, there's a legal ramification for this kind of a thing. If you were to come to me and ask me to take out your appendix, first of all, that would be like the heights of stupidity. But you know, if I did do it, that's called practicing medicine without a license. And if you live through the surgery, which there would be no guarantee of that in this particular case, you'd be lucky if I didn't take off your leg. But, you know, there's a legality in there. You can't deal with it. I've known a couple people who were within the church that actually got involved in criminal cases and ended up doing time in jail. And one guy talked to a preacher, and the preacher said, you know, I can help you, you know, with the sin part of this thing. He says, but there's a legal process that's about to happen here, and I can't do a thing for you on that. You're just going to have, you got yourself in this situation. This is going to happen, and you're just going to have to ride the course out. Maybe somebody can help you with that, but, you know, I can't get you out of that. That's not possible. So, you know, we have to acknowledge, you know, a situation we're just simply not capable of handling. If somebody has a mental health issue, in the hands of somebody who doesn't know how to take out an appendix either, that would be a really bad thing necessarily for me to try to intervene in that or for you to try to intervene in that. But we might know somebody who can help. We might be better qualified because of the mental state of that individual to find somebody who can help them because their judgment's impaired, you know, if that's the case. So, you know, it may not be so much then us giving advice, us finding the people who can help them with this type of a thing. So that's something to be considered. Again, that's not going to happen a lot, but if it does, it will be crucial that we handle it correctly. And can I be there to help this person through the process? Sometimes, you know, the decision's already made and it's already out of our hands. And I think back to last week when we talked about Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he prayed, you know, let this cup pass from me, yet not my will but thine. He had the right to ask that. Did he get the outcome he requested? No, he didn't. And in fact, when he goes into the garden and he asks Peter, James, and John, you know, you stay here and pray. You know, what's he wanting them to pray for? Him. You know, and if he can't, if this cup can't pass from him, then to give him the strength to be there, you know, to make it through it. For them to be with him as he goes down this path, I think is what he was kind of hoping for. And unfortunately, he didn't quite get that the way that would have benefited him. It would not have gotten him off the cross, but it might have made it a little bit easier to bear to have somebody there with him. And sometimes that's, you know, that's the best we can do. There's a time, a lot of times when you're dealing with the end of life of an individual, that we transition in praying, you know, please, Father, extend the life, to Father, let their passing be easy. You know, and, you know, that's how we walk through it. So, you know, that's an investment of ourselves in this situation as well, and that's agape. That's us doing for them what we can. You know, even though we are finite beings, you know, we will do what we can to help them get through the process, but the outcome's already been determined, and we already know it. Just when is the only question. Any questions or comments? So, point of the lesson. Don't be afraid to ask somebody for help on making a decision. That's what we're here for each other. Don't be afraid to have somebody ask you for help and participate in there. They asked you for a reason. They believe that you had something that they might need or might be able to help them in this situation. And, you know, do it if you can. Find somebody better if you can't. Be discreet about it. And finally, be there as they're going through the process. A lot of decisions don't work themselves out overnight. There are long-term commitments and things like that. We serve each other when we participate in helping with that. So, anything else? Gene?
I think the flip side of the first statement up there is if you ask a person and they say they're not qualified, you shouldn't get upset with that answer.
Yeah.
Because they're telling you for your own benefit that, hey, I'm not a qualified person.
Yeah. And I would ask them, I would also say, you know, look, I'm really not qualified to help you with this, you know, this particular need. Do you need help finding somebody who is? See, now I'm investing. I don't have the ability to help the decision, but I may have the ability to help them find the person that can help the decision.
And I think you should be careful and really think about the last. The process may not be simple.
Yeah.
The process may be, you know, convoluted in time.
Yeah.
So think a little bit about what they're asking you to do.
Any other closing thoughts or comments? See you all next week then, and we'll finish this particular course of study with our next lesson.